The town of Bayview, Idaho boasts one of the most amazing views I have ever seen. Now, I have never been there in person, and I'm not a big fan of chilly, snowy climates. But from the still images and videos I've seen depicting life on Lake Pend Oreille, I would likely need a thesaurus to justly describe it. I could call it spectacular, majestic even, and it's definitely tranquil. Well, if you don't count the two grisly murders committed with hammers some 60 years apart, Bayview is a pretty peaceful place. Back in 1949, Bayview, situated near the Canadian border, was a lakefront community just as it is today. The shores of Lake Pend Oreille are lined with single-family residences, houseboats, and more recently, mobile and manufactured homes. Folks from the big city seek the simplicity and beauty of Bayview, and for most, the quiet and solitude are a refuge from the busyness and noise of urban sprawl. But for a young woman named Charlotte Sophia Burns, the quiet little town of Bayview, Idaho was maddening. Charlotte, age 15, lived with her father Charles, mother Ernestine, and brother Louis, who was 12 years old. Around 6:30 p.m. in September 1949, Charlotte walked up to her father's bedside where he was sleeping off a bender. She claimed he was drunk again, and his mumbling scared her and caused her to lose her senses. She carried a 3-pound framing hammer in her hands, and with thoughtful planning and deliberation, she brought that hammer down on his head and continued to strike him until he was dead. Her younger brother had followed her into the bedroom and watched as she bludgeoned the Burns patriarch. Covered with his blood, Charlotte reportedly led Louis out to the barn, where the pair silently helped their mother with the chores. Sometime later, before Ernestine could discover her husband's lifeless, bloody body, Charlotte and Louis took the rowboat out on the lake. As she paddled, she laughed and laughed, her restless spirit briefly satisfied. She rowed the little boat across the lake to Bayview, and the siblings spent the night outside in the dark, hiding in a thicket of brush. Both were arrested the following day, but only Charlotte participated in the actual murder. She confessed to police that she had become frustrated with her father, quote, because he wouldn't keep his promises to take me places, end quote. She begged him daily for boat rides, but he never followed through. She wanted to swim in the lake, but it was far too cold for that. The water rarely hit 60 degrees Fahrenheit, even in July. Charlotte longed for fun, adventure, the excitement of town, but she had traveled from the family farm just twice in her young life. She was tired of her father's broken promises and the agonizing disappointment. So she killed him. At Charlotte's pretrial hearing, Mom Ernestine explained that Charles was a cruel tyrant who expected perfection from his children, and he was hardest on young Charlotte. On October 13th, District Judge E.V. Broughton took pity on the teenager and sentenced her to probation. A panel of 3 psychiatrists determined Charlotte had been virtually terrorized and lived a life of constant fear in the Burns home. She went on to live with a family in California. Legend says her chilling, wicked laughter can still be heard on the lake when the moon is full. Cut to Bayview, Idaho, 2007. Same place, different faces. A man named Larry Cragan, age 28, had just moved to town with his wife Katie and young daughter Emma. The family looked idyllic, but if you peeked behind the curtain, you'd see a pretty flimsy foundation. The marriage had been on shaky ground for some time, but Larry thought a change of scenery would put the fragile family back on solid footing. And it did, for a minute. Larry took a job working on the boat docks, and Katie set up their little home on the lake. A few neighbors popped in right away to welcome them to the neighborhood with some home-baked goodies or a barbecue invite. Things were looking up, and the picturesque lake was certainly serene. Actually, it was starting to make Larry a little crazy. One night, to get away from the tension at home, Larry found himself at the local watering hole. He met a few of the regulars, as well as the barkeep, one of those unofficial historians who's been around forever and knows everybody's secrets. I did say he knew the secrets, but I didn't say he kept them. The bartender poured the newcomer a tall draft and set about scaring the bejesus out of him. "Do you believe in ghosts?" That's what he asked Larry, who leaned forward in his chair, hoping for a good old-fashioned ghost story. So, that night, he heard the legend of the laughing lady on the lake. Shivers crawled up his spine as the bartender detailed Charlotte's brutal crime. He poured Larry another beer and finished his story, listening, straining to hear the laughter from the misty lake. All eyes were fixed on Larry. He knew it was a test. He burst into a hearty laugh, and the others joined in. Maybe this place wasn't so bad after all. A few months later, before the tourists would all return, things were really bad in the Cragan home. Larry and Katie were arguing a lot. He had lost his new job, so finances were a source of anxiety as well. Katie hosted a few of her new neighbors over for coffee and homemade pie. Deborah Daimler and Lorraine Wallace, called Yvonne by most who knew her, had befriended the shy young homemaker. But they had to work hard to get to know her. Normally, she revealed very little. But on this afternoon, she explained that she was leaving Larry and taking Emma with her. With some clandestine help from Yvonne's grandson, Jed Heath, Katie and Emma packed up the SUV and stole away in the night, away from Larry and away from the foreboding lake that chilled them to their marrow. Meantime, the lake had begun to really get to Larry. He heard ghostly laughter in his sleep. He had dreams of bloody hammers. He was up through the night, and now, with no job to go to in the morning and no wife to share his bed, he became isolated and paranoid. They were laughing at him. Well, he didn't actually know that, but he sensed it. They were treating him differently, tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. What was wrong with him, they had to wonder, that his wife and daughter were compelled to move far away from this peaceful life he'd made for them? And that, the move. Jed had helped them. Larry discovered his new friend Jed had offered some neighborly assistance to his wife who wanted to leave him. The invitations to cookouts had waned, and Larry spent more and more time by himself, sitting on the dock, drinking alone. Occasional sounds of an owl or cricket broke the icy stillness, and when the moon was full, he could just make out the haunting, eerie laughter. It was a frigid December 2010. Across the street from the Cragan place sat the mobile home belonging to Patty Heath and her family. Located on North Lime Kiln Road, Patty lived there with her husband Michael, their son Jed, and Michael's mother, Yvonne Wallace. Due to declining health, Yvonne had been forced to retire and sell her beauty shop. She missed the sisterhood of the salon, but she counted herself blessed. Yvonne was very close to her family, especially her daughter-in-law Patty, who had taken over her care and assisted her with her daily needs. The family was hunkered in one snowy Sunday afternoon, watching some TV and savoring the last vestiges of the weekend. Christmas was just days away. Michael had decided to warm up with a hot shower, and when he dressed and exited to the living room, he was greeted with a horror he could never have imagined. There was blood everywhere. He saw his neighbor and friend, Larry Cragan, flee out the front door carrying a bloody hammer. Michael needed to get help fast. His wife Patty, who weighed all of 90 pounds, was slumped in her chair, bleeding profusely from a head wound. His mother Yvonne was semi-conscious, and Jed was just beginning to stir. All were covered in blood from the vicious attacks. Michael cradled his wife, who continued to whisper that she needed to sleep. He frantically called the 911 center, but he couldn't get through. They were isolated out here on the remote lake, and the road to the hospital was windy and treacherous during these winter months. About that time, a handful of holiday shoppers encountered a dazed Larry Cragan with blood on his shirt and hands. By this time, he had forged a reputation as an odd guy, so when he spouted to anyone who would listen, quote, "I just killed 4 people," no one really believed him. But Deborah Daimler believed. She was the first to welcome the Cragans to the neighborhood, and she had seen Larry go from a kind, well-adjusted friend to a scary stranger. Her stomach churned as she stared at his bloody shirt. She questioned Larry, trying to discern who might be in trouble. But she already knew. In the preceding months, the paranoid Cragan had dispatched police to the Heath residence multiple times, claiming that the family was poisoning him. He also accused his friend Jed of harassing his wife and daughter and putting hair in his food. Cops made inquiries, but charges were never filed. They were familiar with Larry's wild tales, including that the government was building some sort of brainwave generator to read his mind. While a friend called 911 to send EMTs to the Heath home, Deborah raced over there to see what she could do to help. It looked like a triage unit, or the set of a horror movie. Deborah sat with her best friend Patty, comforting her until they finally heard the approaching sirens. They loaded the family into multiple ambulances. Michael and Jed had sustained lesser injuries. Yvonne was lapsing in and out of consciousness with damaging blows that crushed part of her skull. But Patty, age 43, was in serious trouble. She had lost a lot of blood and she was barely hanging on as the ambulance raced her to the hospital. She didn't make it. Patty Heath succumbed to her injuries and died that day. Since December 2010, the Heath men recovered, but Yvonne has endured numerous surgeries to repair the damage inflicted by Larry Cragan. And what of Larry, you ask? He was taken into custody without a fight. He readily confessed to the attacks and expressed no remorse. There was a documented history of some mental illness in Larry's background, but that information did not help him at trial. He pled guilty to Patty's murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He was also given 2 15-year sentences for the aggravated battery of Yvonne, Michael, and Jed to run concurrently. He will not be eligible for parole until he has served 30 years behind bars. So, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this spooky little story. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share with your friends who love true crime. I've got lots more scares scheduled through Halloween. Apparently, the YouTube algorithm has the same sorry sense of direction I do. It's taking some time for them to find me here on the platform, but I'm just going to keep doing my thing. I upload new videos at least 2 times a week, so I hope you'll subscribe and check back for more scary, Clary true crime cases and real-life mysteries. Also, please let me know in the comments if you've ever had a ghostly encounter. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, be well. Scary Clary out.